Today, I am going to interview an American English teacher, Carey Bibb, working for italki. Carey, could you first briefly introduce yourself?
Of course. My name is Carey. I am 30 years old. I'm currently living in America in the state Maryland, which is right next to Washington, D.C. I lived in Japan for 5 years, from 2012 to 2017, in Akita Prefecture in Odate City. I love Japan, Japanese culture, Japanese people, and I hope that through these questions today, I can help give you some advice for how to practice English.
I'd like to ask you, a native speaker of English, to tell us, Japanese students of English, how you have achieved your fluency of English, beginning from when you learned to speak until now.
When I was very young, so starting from my birth, my parents would read me many stories. So it was great for me to listen to these English stories by famous American authors like Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss books are amazing to learn English because it's easy for children. There are many rhyming words, and it's very fun. It's very appropriate for children. So my parents would read me stories every night before I would go to bed. So from a very young age, I was listening to English every day. And that was when I started to absorb some English knowledge. When I began to speak, I wouldn't shut up. I would talk a lot about any different topic. And of course, I made many mistakes. When you're young, it's perfectly fine to make mistakes. Even if you don't know the correct grammar point, if you're talking, if you're trying, it's fine. And even today, I'm sure most of you who are watching this video are not children, but it's still perfectly fine to make mistakes. As long as you're trying, as long as you are getting those English words out there, even if you use the wrong vocabulary word or the wrong grammar point, everyone does it. I still make mistakes now, so it's perfectly acceptable. As I grew older, so when I started to speak, I just practiced talking, I practiced reading, and then in elementary school, I started to make friends. And that is a great way to practice your English, talking to other people. I know sometimes if you talk to yourself, you're not improving. You don't know, oh, is this right? Is this not right? But when you talk to other people, you're able to get their feedback, which is partially what having friends is for. Of course, having friends is also to have fun, to party, but it helps you to improve whatever language you're speaking in.
How was your experience of learning foreign languages in junior high school, and university?
So in junior high school and high school, I studied Spanish. We were given the option of either Spanish or French. Unfortunately, no Japanese. And I chose Spanish. I thought, there are many people in America who speak Spanish, so I want to be able to understand these people. And my experience, it was okay. There was a lot of textbook work, there was a lot of reading and writing practice, but not a lot of conversation practice, unfortunately. My teacher was from the Philippines, so she grew up speaking English and a little bit of Spanish, and of course Tagalog, but it wasn't the same as having many people in the class who could speak Spanish. I was taking the class with all English native speakers, so even when we did a few conversation practice activities, we weren't able to correct each other. We didn't know, is this right? Is this wrong? So it was okay. In university, I thought about continuing to study Spanish, but then decided, you know what, I want to try a new language, and so I studied German for 1 year. German and English are from the same language family. So they're from the same language family. They're very closely related. So it was easier for me to study German, but it was the same techniques, the same methods. There was no conversation practice. It was mostly textbook work, mostly reading and writing. So I wasn't able to practice talking. Later in my life, I went to Germany, and that was nice, being able to practice speaking German a little bit. But I was only in Germany for 1 week and then another 3 days, so I wasn't able to practice as much German as I would have liked.
How much of those languages do you remember now?
For Spanish, I can understand a decent amount of Spanish right now. When people talk to me in Spanish, I can understand some vocabulary words. I can understand a few simple sentences, but I can't speak Spanish. I can say, hello, how are you? Very, very basic Spanish. So comprehension is okay. Speaking ability, very low. For German, I would say, again, my comprehension is okay. I can understand a little German. Speaking hello, good morning, some of the numbers. So just the very basic parts that you learn when you are first beginning to study a language. So really, I can't talk in either language. I am nowhere close to being fluent in either language. I'm sure if I went back and studied now I know how to study a foreign language. So it would be easier for me to get back into speaking it. But at the moment, very low.
What worked well when you were learning a second language, and what did not?
The best language, the closest thing that I have to being bilingual is speaking Japanese. And that's because I lived in Japan for 5 years. So immersion helps. Living in that foreign country, learning the language as you are living in Japan, if you're learning Japanese, America, if you're learning English, Germany, if you're learning German. Being able to travel to those countries and speak the language with native speakers is the best way to learn. That's why for reading, I am horrible at Japanese. I practiced calligraphy a little bit. You can see my calligraphy behind me. So I can read and write a little Japanese, but my conversation is the best part of my Japanese. And I became more confident in Japanese because everyone in Japan, they were so encouraging and so nice to me. They would say, wow, you are using chopsticks. That's amazing. You said thank you to me in Japanese. That's fantastic. And with that encouragement, it made me feel better about myself. So I wanted to study more Japanese and get even better. So I would say immersion, talking to native speakers is the best way to learn a second language. If you're not able to go to another country, it's expensive, it's far, you don't have the time, that's fine. But websites like italki, online websites where you can talk to native speakers, that's another great way to learn. Because you're able to talk to native speakers, you're able to have conversations. Maybe not every day, not when you go to the grocery store, but even just once a week, you will find that your abilities in a foreign language will improve. As for what did not work well, rote memorization. Memorizing vocabulary words, memorizing grammar structure, it works. It works, but it's not a good way to actually practice and improve. When I started learning Japanese, I memorized a lot of Japanese vocabulary words. And it was okay. But actually using those vocabulary words in conversation was the best way that I found to improve my Japanese. When I memorized them, sure, some of those random words I still remember. But most of the words, if I didn't use them in conversation, I would quickly forget. So memorizing is useful, but you have to actually use the vocabulary words and the grammar points that you memorized. It's not enough just to memorize them.
You have the chance to experience teaching English in Japanese public schools. What are the major differences that you see between Japanese and American public schools?
So I really liked working at a Japanese public school. I actually worked at, let's see, 1 elementary school and 4 junior high schools when I was in Odate. So I worked in 1 junior high school the entire 5 years, and the other 3 junior high schools I rotated between. So I think that my favorite part of Japanese public school system was how involved the students are in their education, in their school lives. The students are cleaning the school. They are preparing, well, they are putting their food on the trays. They're not preparing the food. They do for nabeko, but not everyday lunch, but they're so involved. American students, they don't clean the school, so it's easy for them to drop a piece of trash and leave it because they don't have to clean it up. Why should they bother cleaning? Someone else is paid to clean up the school. In Japan, they have to take responsibility for their actions, which I think is great. The English education in Japan, it was very textbook based, but it's the same with foreign education in America. So I think in terms of classes, foreign language education is pretty similar between the 2 countries. I think both countries could improve a lot with foreign language education. Japan, I know, is taking steps. Soon, English education is going to be pushed down to 3rd and 4th grade. So hopefully, as English education is made earlier and earlier, the fluency and English ability of Japanese people will improve. But like I said, it's the same in America. Most schools, foreign language education doesn't begin until you're in the 6th grade, which is very late. Your brain is already set. It's a little too old to start learning. So I think it would be good to start learning as an elementary school student. Other things, a positive for the American school system. I think it's good because American students have more freedom. They have more free time than Japanese students, which is, I said it was good. It could be good or bad. I think it's great for students to have some freedom, to not have as much stress. In Japan, my students were in school for 12 hours a day. They would come to school at 7 in the morning, and then finally at 7 in the evening, they were finished with club activities and they could go home and do their homework. In America, the schools started around 7 in the morning and finished at 2 or 2:30. Club activities were not mandatory. Many clubs only met 1 or 2 days after school. So these students, if they were able to go home at 2:30, then they had time to participate in other activities. They could join theater productions. They could join sports teams. They could play some video games and relax. Maybe that's not so good, but a little bit of video games is okay. So that was another major difference that I noticed between American and Japanese public schools. And I hope in the future there's slightly less stress that's put on the Japanese students. I think right now they're so busy and they need some time to be kids, in my opinion. All right.
Okay, lastly, in order to be a good speaker of English like you, what should the Japanese students do?
Biggest thing, conversation. Have conversation with native speakers. If you live in a big city like Tokyo, there are many foreigners in Tokyo. You can go around, and if you see a foreigner, don't run away. Talk to them. Try to have a conversation. Most of the time, foreigners are friendly. They won't scold you. They won't say, "Why are you talking to me?" They want to have a conversation. Another thing that you could do to practice your listening, watch English movies and English TV shows in English. I know sometimes when I went to the movie theater, there would be English movies in Japanese. They would be dubbed instead of with subtitles. And that's a good way to enjoy the movie, but it's of course not a good way to practice your English. So at first you can try to watch these movies and TV shows in English with Japanese subtitles. As you get better, you can listen in English and read English subtitles. And then when your English is really good, you can just listen in English with no subtitles. So that's a great way to improve your listening. Reading, of course, you can read books, you can read articles. There are many simple news stories that you can read online. In the age of the internet, you can find so many different resources that can help you. And with writing, keep a journal, keep a diary. Write a little bit in English every day. I tried that in Japanese when I lived in Japan. I tried to keep a journal every day, and I didn't keep it up. If I did, my reading and my writing would be much better, but I didn't. So my speaking, my listening are pretty good. My reading and writing could be better. But if you keep a journal every day, even if it's just 1 or 2 sentences, I ate a banana for breakfast. I will go to school tomorrow. That's a great way to practice writing. And then you could also read your journal out loud and practice speaking as well. So those are some tips that I have for ways to improve your speaking, listening, reading, and writing abilities in English. Number 1 is conversation. Conversation is the most important part of learning any foreign language. If you're able to have a conversation, then you're practicing listening and speaking at the same time. Your vocabulary will improve, your grammar will improve, and you will be fluent in English in no time.
Okay, thank you, Carey, for giving us pieces of advice to be a good speaker of English. I'm sure Japanese students have enjoyed listening to you and learned a lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.